What is up, guys? Fahi here from awesomedudes.com, and I want to talk a little bit more about arrays and about lists, which are similar to arrays. Now, when we covered arrays, we saw that we can put items in them and that we can, access those items using indexes, so on and so forth. What we did not cover is that we can do this with arrays. So we can also create a public, and I can say here a game object array. So game object array, which I'm gonna call items, and I'm simply gonna leave it like this. Why did I leave it like this? Well, same as with our other variables, it will now be visible here in the inspector panel. Notice here for the script of our tester class, I'm gonna remove the components here because we don't need them. And notice here we have the items array. The size is currently 0, and we can set it, for example, to be 10. And now we can drag and drop game objects or game elements here. For example, here I have the player. I can drag and drop him here. I have the directional light. I can drag and drop it here. The main camera, I can drag and drop it here. And they are going to be counted as items in this array. And we can use indexes to access these items. And notice what I was talking about arrays. So element 0, element 1, 2, 3, 4, they are 0 based. The first element is at index number 0. So this was practically nothing new regarding those elements and whatnot, but notice that we can, as I said, already put make our array public, and then instead of, assigning items here inside of our script, we can assign items from our hierarchy panel, which we'll do a lot in our course. And we can also do the same thing as with our other variables. We can make it to be private, and then we can make it to be a serialized field. So make it a serialized field. It will be the same effect. Nothing here will change because, using a serialized field will make this array publicly available here in the inspector panel, where we can, then put these elements and so on and so forth. Now, also what I want to talk about is lists. So what are lists? And let's declare one and see. So here we can also declare it to be public, and we can say here list, and I can name it items like this. But notice automatically we get an error. If I go here, it says using the generic type system collections generic list requires one type argument. What does this mean? Going back to our generics. So here we need to open greater than and close with the less than sign, and we need to put here some type. So I was talking about this when we used our get component. So using get component also has this greater than or less than and greater than sign. And what does this mean is that inside of these generics, so between them, we put a specific type. In get component case, we put the type that we want to get from our objects, such as rigid body or an audio listener or audio source. But regarding lists here, we can put, for example, game objects, same as with our arrays. And now we have a public list of game objects, and this list can contain game objects. And here you can put anything. You can even put integers, you can put strings, so string, we can even put booleans and whatnot. We can put these elements. If I go here, we are not gonna get any problems, and let me just wait for it and it will go away. And notice here, now we have these 10 elements. This is because our previous array was also named items, and now this is left here, and some of them are checked and some of them are not checked. But essentially arrays are same, or lists are same as arrays. And here I can put game object. We can even initialize it. We can say is equal to new list like this, and this is how we initialize it. So it is equal to new list. And here we also provide the game object as the generic type and open close parentheses. Now, if you are wondering, so if they are the same thing, so lists and arrays, what is the difference between them? Well, before I talk about that, I'm just gonna mention that in order to use lists, this right here needs to be imported, or you need to type using system collections generic. If we don't type it, if I just remove it, notice now we cannot use lists because they are located here in this. This is, or what we need to type, system collections generic. And yeah, when you type that, then you get these lists, or then you can access these lists. Now, going back to the differences between arrays and between lists, what is the difference? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. If I go here and create a private, and I'm going to also make this one private. So we have a private list of game objects. We have here a private array. So I'm going to say game object array. Actually, I'm going to make it integers because it's easier. We don't have any game objects to add into them, but I'm going to use integers. So private integer array, and I'm going to say nums, short for numbers. If we want to declare our integer array, we need to type is equal to new, and then we type integer array, and we also need to add how many elements we have. We have 10. For our lists, we can also do the same thing, so we can type here 10, and let me just go and make sure, because in some programming languages, yes, here also. So we can pass parameters 10. This will be the initial number that this list can take. So what is the catch here? Well, the catch is that arrays are fixed. So arrays are fixed size. That means that here we specify that we have 10 elements, and that is that. We cannot have less than 10. We cannot have more than 10 elements. 10 is what we get, and 10 is what we have, and we have to deal with it. But regarding lists, lists are resizable. So I can come up here and I can say items dot, and I can say add, and I can add 1, for example. Again, I can go here and add 3 or 4, and so on and so forth. And when we add new items, it is going to be added to the next free index. So currently the list here is initialized, and when we initialize it we don't add any number here that will denote how many initial elements can we put before the list resize itself, then the default value is 0. And when we add an element, so we add 1, now the size of the list is 1. When we add another element, now the size of the list is 2. And this first element is put at index 0 because that's the first index that is free. This second element is put in index 1 because that's the next index that is free, so on and so forth. So from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to how many elements we add. And that's the main difference between the integers or between arrays and lists. Arrays are fixed size. We cannot use an array. I cannot go here and say nums.add. We don't even have that functionality built into our array. And that is the main purpose of lists, because we can resize them. They are flexible. We can add new elements. We can even remove elements. We can go here, we can say items dot, and we can remove. You see, we can remove an item. We can also remove all. We can remove at index. So using this remove at index, so let's say 0, it will remove the element that's at index 0, meaning that's the first element. And this is how lists work. Since I said that they are similar as arrays, how can we process them? Well, same way as arrays. Same way. So we can write like this: for int I is equal to 0, I is less than items dot, but instead of length, we are using count. So for arrays, we will use nums dot length, but for items, which is our list, we use items dot count, and then we can say I plus plus, and close or open close curly bracket, and now we can simply access the elements using square brackets. So I can say items and the element that's at I index, and we can, for example, set it to be equal to 3, and this will initialize all elements to the number 3. So same principle as with our arrays. We use open curly or square bracket, close square bracket, and pass the index number we want to access. So passing the index number we want to access. Same as with arrays. Same, everything is the same. And also, as I said, our lists have more functionality. So we can simply type here items, which is the name of our variable list, and now we can go through all of these functions. So we can add an item, add range, as read only, binary search, capacity, clear, contains, convert, copy to, count, equals, so on and so forth. If you are wondering what each of these means, then you can simply go to documentation and you can find that out. Simply go here on your favorite browser, open a new incognito window, and after that, then you can simply search and see. Read about it, read for whatever you want to know, depending on which function you need from your, list. And of course, you are going to use most of these, or you're not going to use most of these, but you are going to use add to add a new one. You're going to use probably clear to, well, clear the list, count to get the number of elements in the list. You are going to go here and let me just find some others, like remove to remove an item, remove all to remove at a specific index. And we will see that through our course. But this is what I wanted to cover before we dive in and start making our games, because as I already mentioned, lists are also important in game development. They are flexible. They are like arrays, but flexible. Arrays are not flexible. How many elements you put in is how many elements you will have. You cannot have less. You cannot have more. And if you need some functionality that's above those restrictions, then you are going to use a list. And again, list is or uses a generic type as a parameter here, which you can pass to denote which types of variables you are going to store inside of this list array, so to say. And again, you need to type using system collections generic. That is automatically added, but if it's not, if you want to use list, you will need to type this out. That is it about lists and arrays and how we can use them and see them in our public inspector. And Fahir here from awesometoots.com. Catch you guys in the new video.